The forest held its breath. Ancient trees stood sentinel, their branches like skeletal fingers against the twilight sky. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. Deep within this silent expanse, shrouded by a darkness so complete it felt alive, sat a solitary cabin. The cabin, built of rough-hewn logs, seemed to sag under the weight of the forest's gaze. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out blankly, reflecting nothing but the encroaching darkness. The only sound was the rustle of unseen creatures and the occasional groan of the wind through the trees. It was a place of deep solitude, a place where one could easily get lost, not just physically, but also within the labyrinth of one's own mind. This was the destination of Sarah, a young woman seeking solace from a life that had recently unraveled. She had come seeking peace, a chance to reconnect with herself amidst the quiet grandeur of nature. Little did she know, she was stepping into a nightmare woven from silence and shadows, a place where fear itself was alive and waiting. The cabin's interior was a study in muted tones and oppressive shadows. Dust motes danced in the thin slivers of light that pierced through cracks in the boarded-up windows. The air hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of mildew and decay. It felt ancient, untouched, as if time itself had forgotten this place. The furniture, draped in dusty sheets, loomed like phantoms in the gloom. Each corner seemed to hold a deeper darkness, a lurking presence that watched Sarah's every move. The silence was absolute, broken only by the frantic thump of her own heart. The walls, painted in shades of fading gray and brown, seemed to absorb the meager light, adding to the overwhelming sense of claustrophobia. Even the fireplace, cold and empty, seemed to exude a chill that sank deep into Sarah's bones. The cabin, once a refuge, now felt like a prison closing in on her with every passing moment. Sarah, her breath catching in her throat, fumbled for the light switch. A flicker, a sputter, then darkness. The silence pressed in, heavy and absolute. She was truly alone. She moved cautiously, her footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of leaves against the roof, sent shivers down her spine. The darkness seemed to amplify every sound, transforming the mundane into the menacing. She unpacked her meager belongings, each item a small beacon of normalcy in this increasingly unsettling environment. But as the hours ticked by, the silence began to wear on her nerves. The solitude she craved was quickly morphing into suffocating isolation. The cabin, once a sanctuary, was now a cage, trapping her with her own mounting fear. Nightfall descended like a shroud. The forest outside became a symphony of unseen movement and unsettling noises. Sarah, huddled by the fireplace, tried to ignore the growing sense of unease that gnawed at her insides. It began with a faint scratching at the window, a branch, she told herself, brushing it off. Then came a soft thud from upstairs, followed by the distinct sensation of being watched. A cold draft snaked across the back of her neck, raising goosebumps on her skin. Then the whispers started, low, indistinct murmurs, just on the edge of hearing. They seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, weaving around her, taunting her. They spoke of fear, of loneliness, of something dark and hungry lurking just beyond the veil of reality. Sarah sat bolt upright, her heart pounding against her ribs. The whispers were louder now, more insistent. They swirled around her, weaving a tapestry of fear and paranoia. She strained to make out words, but the voices remained frustratingly indistinct. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, extinguishing the few candles she had managed to light. The darkness was absolute, suffocating. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, taking on grotesque and menacing forms. She fumbled for her flashlight, her hand trembling. The beam flickered to life, cutting through the darkness like a knife. But the light only served to heighten her terror, revealing the true extent of the cabin's decay and the shadows that seemed to writhe and pulsate at the edge of the beam. "Let me in!" A voice rasped so close it seemed to be whispered directly into her ear. Sarah whirled around, her flashlight beam dancing wildly across the room, but there was nothing there. "We've been waiting for you," another voice hissed, cold and sharp as shattered glass. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing through the empty rooms of the cabin. The whispers were relentless now, a cacophony of voices, each one filled with malice and hunger. They spoke of things Sarah couldn't comprehend, of ancient rituals and forgotten gods, of a darkness that predated humanity itself. They whispered her name over and over, each utterance sending a fresh wave of terror crashing over her. Panic clawed at Sarah's throat. The cabin, once a refuge, now felt like a living, breathing entity, closing in on her, suffocating her with its darkness. The whispers seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves, growing louder, more insistent, feeding off her terror. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with a palpable sense of dread. The shadows in the corners seemed to writhe and pulsate, as if straining to break free. She felt a presence in the room with her, something ancient and malevolent, its eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She stumbled back, her hand blindly searching for support. Her fingers closed around something cold and metallic. It was a heavy iron poker, left abandoned by the fireplace. Clutching it tightly, she felt a surge of desperate courage. She wouldn't surrender to this darkness without a fight. Driven by fear and adrenaline, Sarah stumbled through the darkened cabin, her every sense on high alert. The whispers followed her relentlessly, their voices growing louder, more menacing. They were toying with her, herding her towards something sinister. She found herself in front of an old tarnished mirror. Its surface was cloudy, obscured by years of neglect. As she stared into its depths, she noticed something unsettling. Reflected back at her wasn't her own terrified face, but something else, something dark and monstrous, its eyes burning with an unholy light. Then, with a sickening realization, she understood. It wasn't something outside that was tormenting her, but something within. The whispers, the shadows, the fear, it all stemmed from her own fractured psyche, a darkness she had carried within her all along. The forest held its breath, the ancient trees standing sentinel as a new car crawled its way up the overgrown path. Two figures emerged, silhouetted against the dying light of the setting sun. A young couple, their faces filled with the anticipation of a weekend retreat. The man, tall and sturdy, unloaded their bags, while the woman, her laughter echoing through the stillness, unlocked the cabin door. The hinges groaned, as if protesting after a long silence. The woman stepped inside, her smile widening as she inhaled the musty scent of the old cabin. "It's perfect," she called out, her voice echoing in the stillness. "Absolutely perfect." The forest held its breath, the shadows lengthening as the couple disappeared inside. The cabin, silent and watchful, absorbed them into its darkness, eager to feed on their fear, to whisper its secrets into their hearts. The horror, it seemed, was far from over. It was just beginning.